right, good afternoon, guys. We are back with another episode of the Principal's Chair. So today we'll be doing part 2 with Dr. Melissa White, and we'll be discussing her study. And I'll let her talk about the topic of her study one more time.
The topic of my study is how 11th and 12th grade teachers perceive a solution to grade inflation and social promotion in the schools.
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple points we'll be hitting today, and I wrote them down because I'm just genuinely interested in this topic, and it's a topic that a lot of teachers, educators in general, don't get to talk about without being ridiculed or looked down upon. But a couple of the points that we'll hit today include teachers' mindsets and their feelings on education today. And then we'll be discussing a little bit about the grading scale, that we use now. And I know for a person my age, I'm 30, so in reference to how long public education has been a thing, I guess we can say recently the grading scale has changed, because I remember when I was in K-12 schools, it was still to a point where a 93 was an A up to a 100, and now we're down to a 90 being an A.
Correct. The one thing about it is K-12 is making that adjustment. However, the colleges and universities are not. They are maintaining the minimum grade for an A as a 93.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the two worlds are not meshing, it's more like a collision. And so when a student earns an A here between a 90 to 100, it's not reflected there the same way. Not only is it skewing the student's understanding of what now constitutes an A, where they might make that 92 and all of a sudden they've got a B. And so now they're confused, and a B shows up on their Carnegie scales as their GPA at the end. And so it's a 1, 2, 3, 4. And when they start getting the threes, they're like, wait a minute, I should be an A and I'm not an A. And the flip side of that is the universities are looking at these students that have A's listed and have B's listed, and that differing scale, that 10 point instead of the 7 point. The universities are looking at these students thinking off the cuff by just looking at the letter grade that, okay, this student should be working between a 93 and a 100, when they don't realize that student may have a 90,
right,
which would be a B in their world.
Right. So let's think about this for a second. And I know that the scale moves up when we get to the college level. So do you think that the quality of work plays a part in whether you get that A in K-12 versus that A in college?
There is a substantial gap in the quality of work that constitutes an A in K-12 versus what constitutes an A in colleges and universities. Some of my studies, when I talked to the teachers, they were having students that could barely do 5-paragraph essays, and then you have professors expecting 5-page reports and essays, and they couldn't deliver. And this is in their freshman year, and it was causing a lot of students to drop in their freshman year, which was really affecting freshman retention rates in colleges and universities.
And what are colleges doing now to combat that? Because I know, when you have kids who are used to performing at what we consider to be that A level, but when they get to college, it's a little bit further out of reach, but at the same time, the difficulty of reaching that is even further out of reach. So what are colleges doing to combat that in order to keep their students in? Because without students, colleges they can't run, right? Because they need that funding and stuff like that. So what are they doing to combat that?
Most of them, as we touched on before, are doing remedial courses. That's their, I guess, round one of intervention, and they have to offer these courses free to the students, and they don't count for any credits, so the student is exerting energy for nothing. That does not count for anything for them, because they weren't able to exert that same energy before and be college ready, officially college ready. And with the schools being so quick to drop that scale, and the universities being so steadfast about not dropping that scale, the gap continues to grow.
Right.
And so with the remedial classes, they're trying to bridge that gap, but nobody benefits from it at all.
So do you think that the K-12 system, is it just the fact that we're ignoring this, or what do you think it is, as far as us knowing that our kids are going into college not being fully prepared for the academic difficulty of a 4-year college?
This is where one of the hard conversations comes in, because this is where social promotion hits. Colleges don't socially promote. It does not exist in the post-secondary realm. It does here. And these students have been passed along, regardless of what they are exhibiting in the classroom. And the universities are like, you're going to stay here or we're going to fail you out. Students losing scholarships, just losing money. And nobody knows what to do, because there's that lack of academic coping skills. They don't know how to bridge that own gap within themselves, because they've never been taught the skills to monitor and adjust and see, to look at themselves. What am I doing? What am I not doing?
Right.
Instead of pointing the finger.
Yeah. And we were having a conversation earlier about one of the students that you said that now comes back to his high school to talk to the kids about what they need to do, having that self-awareness when it comes to their own academics. Talk to that point, because I really like that story, and I think that it's something that needs to be heard. And it's great that a student who experienced this himself comes back to say, hey, this is what it is for real.
The story is, a teacher had a student that went on to college, university, played sports, and started realizing that where they were passing before, they weren't passing now, and they couldn't figure it out. And at first, their first knee-jerk reaction was to blame their senior teachers, and he was having to pay for tutors out of pocket. And just to be able to keep up, he was having to make these efforts, and he couldn't figure out why. I mean, it's their fault, until one day he stopped and he realized, and he looked at what he had done before in K-12 versus what was being expected of him now. And this student actually had his own aha moment, and he realized it wasn't my teachers. I did not invest in my own self enough to bridge this gap, or know how to bridge this gap. And so now this student comes back every year and talks to the students there about being academically self-aware.
Wow. And did he have anything to say on how the students receive that, or?
The teacher said, for the most part, when he comes in and he speaks to them, there are a lot more students that now care, that now understand it will come back and bite them if they don't get that skill now. And the problem in that is where I was going to a minute ago, with that social promotion. Trying to remember exactly how I was going to say this. The problem, and I am so sorry. I went brain dead all of a sudden.
No, you're good. You're fine.
Let me reflect back, because there was a point to that.
So I think just to try to help you get back on track, I think when you mentioned social promotion, you said that he had his own aha moment. And then at what point did he realize this? Was it his freshman year, sophomore year?
He realized it towards the end of his freshman year. And
okay. So that's when you kind of just taking those entry level courses, something kind of similar to what you're coming from in high school. But then you get into what you're actually going to be studying. So, for example, if you're an education major, you have your entry-level Spanish, English, math classes. But, going into that second semester, when that focus starts to hone in a little bit more, when it goes from general math to algebra, or what other math classes do we take in college?
Calculus.
When it really starts to have a focus where it takes you studying,
Mm-hmm.
practicing outside of the classroom on your own time to be able to come back and contribute to class discussions, to the further the improvement of math itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? What do you do if you're not already, self-aware of how you're gonna help yourself to achieve to succeed academically to that college level coming from the high school level?
For a student that doesn't have access to someone like this particular student, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to have to be either a teacher coming up and realizing that whereas K-12 is more concerned with the student's well-being, and this is not to sound heartless by any stretch of the imagination, but universities are not as concerted about your well-being as much as they are preparing you for an academic success, for a job, a career, a place in a work setting.
Right. And just to that point, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're talking about jobs in the real world, and it's like our kids have to understand that the world we live in now, you used to have to compete with people who were local.
Yes.
Right. But now you're competing with people who live in China,
yes,
Russia,
yes,
all over Asia, Africa, for the same types of jobs, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm not intrinsically motivated to be better,
mm-hmm.
there's a whole lot of people who are ready to step on my head to get to the same goal.
And that is another part that came up in the study, is that there is such a level of competition that where this child came out of high school on top, valedictorian, all of a sudden they start meeting other kids from other nations who are just blowing them out of the water, and they can't keep up. And then it becomes also, not only do they not know how to handle academically, excuse me, but now they don't know how they fit in anymore, and that causes a complete social disconnect for them, to where they can't find their own footing.
And then going back to what you said about blaming the teachers, so and that's how I want to bring this back to
yes.
How teachers feel about it. And I know I've looked over here a couple of times, and that's because there's a teacher in the room who's sitting here. So two teachers sitting in the room here, but I know that as a teacher, right? This is my first year out of the classroom. I am going to be graded per se, or evaluated on how my students perform. How does that make me feel when the bar is steadily being lowered for students, right? So if I'm gonna lower my expectations of you, but keep the high expectations of a teacher, how do we expect to keep teachers in the profession? How do we keep them going to make sure that we're still maintaining a high level of education?
Hear their voices. Excuse me, I apologize. To kind of go back a little bit and kind of build up to that, data is stored. The teachers are held accountable through testing, state testing, through iReady, and we already know that there's not much of a reliability in testing, because students have bad days.
That's true.
And you also have students that are not quite to that level, that haven't raised up to where they should be. Learning disabilities don't get factored in. There's so much that these teachers are held accountable for on students, to where they only see this much of a snapshot of that student, and that's their score. And just taking that into accountability, and the raising or lowering the grading scale in K-12, basically what is happening is there has been an interesting shift in the bell curve. And what has happened was, a bell curve it describes the shape of the data, and it's always symmetrical. It's always going to be equal on both sides. So when you actually start moving that norm to an A, you are taking that bell curve and you're making it asymmetrical. You're kind of pushing it against like a glass ceiling, like a wall. And you are taking the point to where you have a standard deviation that is too long on one side and no standard of deviation on the upper end unless you create a new level of grade. How do you go above an A?
Right.
And
does that describe the term gap per se?
That's part of where the gap is showing up, because in K-12 this bell curve is getting pushed up against the way, and instead of it being a normal distribution, it becomes an approximately normal distribution of data, and it's less reliable. And so when colleges and universities take this bell curve of these students that are coming to them with their scores, that's where the skewing happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not an accurate representation of what they're getting, and it's not an accurate representation on teachers either.
Okay. So let me ask you this question, and this is a personal question. How does that make you feel as a teacher currently in 2024?
Speaking from my own experiences, frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Because, in speaking just frankly, there have been a lot of times where I feel like I'm in a valley, and I've got parents on this side, and I've got lawmakers and administration on this side. And the parents, we're frontline. They have a frustration with their students. Instead of, since all of this has come about with grade inflation and social promotion, they no longer ask the student, what have you been doing, what have you not been doing, why does your grade look like this? They're now coming to the teachers and saying, why does my child's grade look like this, what did you do?
Right.
So we are getting it from their end, because they don't know what we have going on the opposite side, which is the mandates and the administration and the lawmakers in education. Mm-hmm. And so they're completely separated from what's going on, and it's rolling down the hill from them as well. They hold us accountable. They put us in the limelight and make it, and it's a lot of the teachers are feeling, and this also came out in my study, they're feeling like they're being made to be the scapegoat.
Mm-hmm. I definitely understand that.
And this is, like I said, this is one of those really hard conversations to have, because it's a really touchy subject. Mm-hmm. Because teachers are not feeling heard, and they are not feeling validated. And we touched on this before as well, they're being put into program after program, PD after PD, professional development, and being made to learn new systems, new this, new that, and it's to the point to where, okay, now we're learning this. How long are we going to be stuck with this until they decide, let's move on to something else?
Right.
And which is why I said I was really glad to see Avid come along, because it seems like somebody's hearing us. Because Avid is not so much a
program,
so much a program, but a system of helps. Mm-hmm. For both the student and the teacher, and even the parent. And I think what really needs to happen is there needs to be a coming together to where all parties involved need to have an understanding that we're all in this together. Mm-hmm. It is not one person's fault. It's just our main goal is altruistic. We want to help the student, but are we truly going about it in the right ways all the time?
Right.
Is what it boils down to.
Yeah. And I think the more support you can give a teacher is the best way you can, help our students, because I know we've shifted focus from a teacher-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom. Mm-hmm. And you'll hear that a lot now in education, but it's like we're forgetting the teachers.
Yeah.
Right? We're forgetting the teachers, and like you said, using them as the scapegoat. But I've seen, in my time in education, I've seen several teachers leave the profession. Mm-hmm. and these are some of the best teachers in the profession. The ones that come in early, the ones that stay late to make sure that I have the perfect lesson plan, the proper preparation for what I'm going to be teaching my kids for the next 3, 4, 6 weeks. And they're putting in all of this effort to make these things happen for our kids, but kids don't have expectations for themselves, right? And it's because, and realistically, just speaking candidly, they don't have to, because when it comes down to it, I know I'm going to be passed anyway. right? So when my teacher presents me with a challenge and holds me accountable, I can say, your class is boring, or you're bullying me, and this is a real thing. Kids will say teachers are bullying them just for holding them accountable.
Yeah.
Because realistically, accountability is not. It's something that's fading, right? And when I'm putting my heart and my effort into teaching you, giving you the best education I can, and you're taking that as me bullying you or being rude to you, how do you keep me in this profession? How do you keep me motivated to do the best that I can?
Again, it boils down to actually just sitting down and listening, just letting like a community coming together, and we there's really no one way that could really solve the problem right now, because we're at the bottom of that. We're at where teachers are leaving. I mean, it's like a mass exodus out of the profession. And, at this point, somebody's got to say, hold up. Let's take a look at everything before we throw the baby out with the bathwater, and just come together in a consortium of understanding that we are here to help the student, but somebody's got to help us help the student.
Yep. And it really is the parents, because there has to be some connection. And we'll say that all the time. Oh, we need to come together. We need to talk. But I think people would much more rather complain about what you're doing wrong than actually bring some sort of solution to the table. Right. So and me as a parent, I try to tell my kids, even my 1 year. I have a 1-year-old daughter. I try to help her even when she's doing something that she knows that she's not supposed to be doing. I try to help her understand, this is your responsibility. This is where you mess up at.
Yes.
Right. So when she gets older, it's not as difficult, and I'm not going to push it off with IEPs. You know how this go. A lot of parents will say, "Oh, well, his IEP says this, so he's allowed to get away with this." No. I'm going to hold you accountable starting now, so when it comes to you turning 12, 15, 20 years old, it's not as difficult. Right? You're going to be introduced to that accountability piece, so you're not blaming your teacher for why you can't succeed academically.
Correct. What I would love to see happen is to, even if it's once a month, once a quarter, have parents come in and literally just teach them what goes on in education so that they can better understand, because the kids are not going home and telling them.
That's true.
And just to have that open forum with the parents as well, just to explain how the education system works. Sit down one night and explain to them that it starts with mandates, it starts with lawmakers, then we're held accountable this way. Instead of pointing the fingers, it's like a ceasefire. Let's hold up and let's take a look at the whole picture and see what's really going on and who's doing what. Because here, especially since COVID and everybody was so separated out, it then became a he said, she said, it's their fault. No, it's their fault. And, just knocking heads with one another instead of trying to find the solution.
Right.
I think now we're at a point where we have to do something to educate the community how education truly works. Yep. Is it not broken? No, it is. It is very broken. But we can't fix it until we all come together and come with a solution to at least get it closer to being fixed.
Yeah.
And there are ways, but a lot of it takes understanding. It takes willingness. And it takes getting rid of a mindset. And that mindset being it's always somebody else's fault. That there's accountability on all fronts. And that's where we hit that brick wall. Because, you could have a community meeting like that tonight, and I guarantee you're going to have some parents stand up and voice, but you're picking on my child. You have to stop and look. Your child is one in a classroom of 20, 25 students.
Yeah.
And it's not just your child. We're trying to help everyone here. We may have 5 children in there that are performing below the bar, and we're trying to figure out how to get them up. It's not just about your child. There are more people involved.
Right. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that. That's actually a great idea. You know, getting parents in the building more often.
Yes.
You know, letting them see what's happening, see what's going on. But you know, at the same time too, the safety piece, right? How do we get parents in the building without somebody complaining about, oh wow, these people in the building, you know, COVID going around, everything's going around. How do you actually get them in the building? Because there's going to be those complaints, and on top of the complaints, there's always going to be the time factor piece. I don't have time for that. I got to work. I got other kids to take care of. So I think just like what you said, there has to be an accountability piece on all fronts. So if you're a parent and you want to complain about what's happening at the school, come in and see what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? Then you learn that your child can do some wrong. You know what I mean? And let them see what type of accountability that we're trying to hand out to our kids, and that is not actually me bullying your child or calling your child out. So
I think in this day and age, with so many people being concerned about coming into the building, stream it live. Parents in the building, stream it live.
Look at that.
And make sure it gets recorded. Parents couldn't stream live at that time. Well, there it is right there. Just click and play. And that way the entire thing is there for the parents to be able to be more educated. Because I want to be honest, I went to school at a late age. I was 36 when I started my bachelor's for education. And I honestly, as a parent, was clueless because I had 3 kids when I went back to school. One was in middle school, and the other 2 were starting out in elementary, just starting in. And I was really clueless to what the education system was and how it worked. And I mean, it would, to be honest, it wouldn't hurt to put parents through an education 101 class. I mean, and that's not to be flippant, but I'm like, you know, if you don't understand the system, how are you going to work against the system?
Right.
How are you going to criticize the system if you don't know it?
Right. Well, that's some good conversation, man. That's our time for today. We are going to be back with a part 3. But I do want to challenge everybody on this video to, you know, kind of pick up on what Dr. White said. If you can, take some time to get into your child's school.
Yes.
You know, ask questions, figure out how you can get involved to actually be able to help bridge the gap rather than, you know, just complaining about it and talking about what type of problems we have.
Yeah.
That's our time for today, y'all. We will see y'all on the next one.